County. Thank you all for coming. I know it's hot, although it's going to get a lot hotter 2-3 hours from now, so I'm glad we're knocking this out now. I'm here joined with our Secretary of State, Cord Byrd. We have Rep. Abbott, Sheriff Donnie Edenfield, members of the Jackson County Commission, Marianna Mayor Alan Ward, members of the Marianna City Commission, and Police Chief Hayes Baggett. I want to thank everybody. I'm going to get into kind of why we're here, but I think people see this. And so my thing is like, instead of me being here with the big sheet, why don't we just open it up and everyone can see and then we can go. All right, so how do you do this one? Man, this is like, are you supposed to take those off? In the back here? Oh, just pull? Wow. Now that is a good looking statue. You know, we've been doing these for America 250, and I know we've already had July 4th, but my view is we're going to celebrate the whole year because we think it's important to, one, just give credit to the founding fathers and the founding generation from 250 years ago, but also to remind our current generation that we're fortunate to have this great inheritance of liberty and that we have a duty to preserve it and make sure that it can live on for another 250 years. So we've been doing the statues in different counties, and we started by saying, so Cord is the Secretary of State, oversees this. We did an executive order on America 250 in like November of 2024 to get ready for this, and we've done a lot with kids. We've done essay contests, we've given scholarships, you name it, we've done it. And but one of the things we did was every county was named after this is how we started. Founding father name, we would do a statute and commemorate it. And part of the reason why I wanted to do it, well, one, I knew it was a buyer's market. You have a lot of these other states are taking down statues of the founding fathers. Hey, if I can get James Madison at a discount, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to put him up in Madison County. I'm going to put Washington. I'm going to get all that done. And so we did that. And I mean, could you imagine if Harris were president during America 250? It would be basically just how bad America is, and it would just be it would be intolerable to do. So, anyways, it would be kind of peak woke. That's dead in Florida, but it's not dead everywhere. So we did it. So we did Madison, Hamilton, Franklin, Monroe, Washington, Jefferson, and that was the founders did. We also did in the state capitol an amazing statute that we got lended to us from Mount Vernon of Washington. So you go in now, if you want to go to the governor's office, you pass this great statue. And then we just put Ponce de Leon in the state capital. European discovery of America, Florida. We're older than Virginia, and we're older than Plymouth Rock. And that's just a fact in terms of how you do it with our Florida history. So we did that, and we've done a lot of other things with schools and all this. But then we said, you know, there's also people throughout American history that have made an impact and that have had ties in one way or another to Florida, and we want to be able to recognize that. So we started rolling out different things. You know, we did Frederick Douglass in St. Augustine. He gave a big speech in 1889. We did Ronald Reagan at Florida International University, amazing statue down there. The president's house there at FIU is already named after Reagan. So we then commemorated this and all this. And people were like, hey, you got to do Andrew Jackson. And people are like, you got to do one of those in Pensacola. Obviously, he was the first territorial governor of Florida, Pensacola. Well, they already have an Andrew Jackson statue. And so I said, why don't we do Jackson County? Doesn't that make a lot of sense to do that? And so we started getting that run. And I'll tell you, we've done a lot of great statues. And I think that all of them have been very, very good. But I don't know that we've done anyone at this level. I mean, this is pretty remarkable to be able to have this here. And I think it's something that's really, really significant. So we've been involved in America 250 probably before any other state. We did more robustly than any other state. Cord oversaw our pavilion on the National Mall during the America 250 celebrations in D.C. I didn't go to, you know, D.C. is worse in the Florida for heat than Florida is. Let me tell you, I've been up there for it. But Cord was there. our pavilion was the top attended pavilion of all 50 states. And part of it is because we put a lot of effort into it. We weren't even one of the original 13 colonies, and yet we're the best pavilion. So we did that. We did all these other things. And, you know, part of it is not, there's a little pomp and circumstance. There's nothing wrong with that. But part of it is we really do want to remind people that we're fortunate to be citizens of this country. And we're fortunate to have people that pledge their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, and then people later like Jackson, and we did Coolidge in Lake Wales, we've done Frederick Douglass, we did Reagan, we've done a lot of others, people that have also fought in their own way for these ideals. And it's interesting because I look around the country now, and you see these candidates running for office 250 years in, and we have candidates running for office saying they want to abolish the police, abolish prisons, abolish the U.S. Senate, pack the Supreme Court, eliminate the Electoral College. And I'm just thinking to myself, we can have differences. Hell, the Founding Fathers had differences. I mean, the minute that the Constitution got put into effect, Washington convenes a cabinet, and you got Hamilton and Jefferson fighting over the limits of the federal government's powers. Andrew Jackson, which I'll talk about in a minute, had a lot to say about that. Those are normal disagreements. They're healthy. They're tough sometimes. But all those people believed in kind of the bedrock principles of the American Revolution. When I see some of these people out there wanting to abolish all these things and impose basically a socialist or communist system, those are people that reject America 250. Those are people that reject the Declaration of Independence. They reject the Constitution. What they're selling sometimes is put out as being trendy or kind of new and all this stuff. It's not. The Founding Fathers were big students of history. They studied all these different things that have been proposed over the years. And look, the superficialities change, the window dressing changes, but ultimately underneath that is a view of authoritarianism. And they believe that government should ultimately dictate what we can do or not do. And the Founding Fathers thought our rights didn't come from government, they came from God. And that is how the American system was set up. But we're having big debates now, not about the contours of that system, but you have people that are totally rejecting the entire system and the entire American Revolution. That's another reason why it's important to talk about what it means to be an American. That's why it's important to talk about that we had founders risk their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor for things that were enduring and things that were true. And we live in a world now where the WNBA has to meet in secret for weeks to try to determine what a woman is. I don't think James Madison and George Washington would have had very difficult time determining that, right? And we live in this world where there's some people that want to tell us that 2 + 2 = 5. And it's our responsibility as free people to reject people that are going to tell us 2 + 2 = 5 and to insist on the truth. The truth will ultimately set you free, but you can't have a free society based on a foundation of lies. It has to be a foundation of truths. So these are really fundamental disagreements that you see going on in the country. It is not Hamilton Jefferson. It is not Jackson versus what ended up becoming the early Whigs. It is not the debates that happened in the 60s or the debates that have happened. This is different. And I think the folks that are pursuing this agenda are wrong to reject the insights of the founders. The reality is what happened in 1776, the foundation they laid. Yeah, the circumstances were different. I was just in Polk County where we have vertiports where we have these flying cars are going to be certified in Florida. There's autonomous vehicles, social media, all kinds of stuff that happens now. Some of it good, some of it not so good, but none of that would have been around in 1776. But you know, human nature has not changed since 1776. The source of our rights hasn't changed. The need to limit government power and concentrations of power hasn't changed. All of those are enduring principles that we need to see reflected in how we govern society. And the thing I can say that I'm proud of is if you look at how we've governed the state of Florida over the last 7.5 years, we've kept faith with those founding principles. We are an example of how you can succeed with limited government. We've reduced our budget in Florida 4 years in a row. Show me another state that has reduced the budget 4 years in a row. I mean, maybe a small state has, but none of the big states. New York State, we have 4 million more residents than New York State does. Their budget is over twice as large as Florida's budget. We're $117 billion. They're $268 billion. Where is that money going that they're taxing? And now they want to tax more and more and more. And we don't have an income tax. We won't. So how we've done things show, self-government can work. People, if you allow them to pursue their dreams and make decisions, that was during COVID we did that. During the fighting the woke, during the rioting we wouldn't let happen in Florida, all these things, you can succeed and succeed very well. So I'm proud that Florida's been able to lead the pack on so many different things. That's not true in some of these other states who've rejected those principles. And we see it with people fleeing states. We see it with some of these cities decaying. And it's sad because the playbook is there for you. All you got to do is study a little history. All you got to do is familiarize yourself with the insights of the founders, and then you got to figure out, how you apply that intelligently to the issues before us. But there's not a new playbook that all of a sudden is going to be devised. It's going to be sold by some of these snake oil salesman politicians that we see in Michigan and New York City and all around the country. Those guys are selling you false promises. Those guys are selling you snake oil. And ultimately, some of them have gotten elected. Others hopefully will not get elected. But either way, if those policies get put into place, people are going to be poorer as a result. So that brings us here to Andrew Jackson. And I wanted to do Andrew Jackson for a number of reasons. One, just a major connection to the state of Florida as being the first governor of the state of Florida. It was a territorial Florida. It was a time then when you had the British, he's fighting the British, you had the Spanish who had colony. There was all this stuff, but all the founding fathers really from the very beginning, they wanted Florida as part of the United States. They knew strategically it was important. They wanted to make sure that that got done. Jackson, during the War of 1812 in New Orleans, and then what he did in Florida, he became a national icon and a national hero. And in 1821, Spain transferred Florida to the United States. Jackson accepted the ceremonial transfer. They lowered the Spanish flag, raised the American flag, did a cannon salute, and played the Star-Spangled Banner in Pensacola. So that's a foundational moment in Florida history. And he came again to organize the first territorial government. He wasn't governor for very long, but he had a major impact on our state. So then he ends up becoming president of the United States. And I think he's important, for a couple of reasons. But for me, when I look back at what he did, they had a debate during his time about whether they should charter another Bank of the United States. And the Congress wanted to charter another national bank. They had done a bank before with Hamilton. The bank had expired. They needed to recharter. And they passed this. And it gets on Jackson's desk. And he's got to decide what he wants to do with it. And he vetoes the bank, which was a big deal. I mean, there are only so many issues that would come across a president's desk then. Government was much smaller. And he gets that, and he charges it, and he does his veto message. And he has, I think, really two important points that I think are as relevant today as they were when Jackson wrote his veto message. The first was, what is the proper role of government in terms of setting a foundation in society for people to make the best of their God-given talents versus setting up artificial privileges for some in society at the expense of others. And so he said that the bank really represented a form of crony capitalism where certain people had artificial distinctions given to them, whereas the great mass of the people who didn't have access to the levels of power, they didn't get any type of those benefits. And he said, and all of our founding fathers said, when you have a free society, you are not going to ever have equal outcomes. And you shouldn't have equal outcomes because people are free to make decisions. Some people have more talent. Some people work harder. Some people make good decisions. Some people make bad decisions. There's a whole host of things that go out. And the notion that you're equal under the law, that should mean you're equal in outcome, every founding father rejected that. And Jackson rejected that. He said, you are not ever going to have an equality of outcome. You are going to have differences in wealth accumulation, and that's just the way a free society works. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to impose additional barriers or give certain people positive distinctions at the exclusion of others. And he felt that the bank was doing that, basically picking winners and losers. And he didn't think a free society, they didn't really call it capitalism then, but a more market-based economy where people were free to make their own decisions, that worked best when government was limited and not saying you win and the other people lose. The other thing that was the issue was the bank constitutional? And a lot of people at the time were like, well, of course it's constitutional. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled Chief Justice John Marshall, the first the first great Chief Justice, he ruled that the Bank of the United States was a valid exercise of the federal government's commerce power and to be able to use any power necessary and proper. McCulloch versus Maryland, famous Supreme Court case. So of course it's constitutional. And Jackson said, no, that's not really how it works. He said, as the president, he had a responsibility to determine what he thought was constitutional or not. So if there's a bill on his desk that he believes is unconstitutional, he has a responsibility to veto that legislation. Doesn't matter that the Supreme Court said that it was constitutional in a different case. He had to make his own judgment that actually it exceeded Congress's power under the Constitution. And what that brings us to is something that Lincoln would then say later when he opposed the Dred Scott decision. We have three different branches of government. They're assigned different powers. Some have more power assigned than others, but none are superior to the other. And so and a lot of people now today say, oh, well, if the Supreme Court says this, then that's the end of it. Andrew Jackson rejected that. I think most of our founding fathers rejected that. Abraham Lincoln certainly rejected that. He said you have a responsibility as an office holder to make judgments on the constitutionality of legislative acts and of your own actions. That's a principle I followed. If legislature passes something, and I honestly believe it's unconstitutional, I do veto the legislation, even if I agree with it as a matter of policy. Then there's others that I think are plainly constitutional. Every time I sign anything, they go in and sue, right? I mean, they go to find a liberal judge and sue, do this and that. And sometimes the judges, we usually went on appeal, but that's their judgment. I made my judgment, and you go. Andrew Jackson made the judgment. He said, I understand the Supreme Court said that, but I think it exceeds Congress's authority, and so I'm duty-bound to veto the legislation. So probably one of the most significant vetoes in the history of the United States of America. And if you read even kind of the last third of that veto message, those themes are very relevant today with some of the issues that we see before us. I mean, you look at something like big tech, massive companies. We've never had companies this wealthy and this powerful. They're obviously pushing artificial intelligence, trying to get that into every crevice of American life. You know, on the one hand, you have a company, you want to develop things like it's a free country, but what artificial privileges are they enjoying? What artificial privileges are they seeking beyond the ones they already enjoy? And I think that is where Jackson really would have drawn the line, and he would have said, no, you don't give them artificial privileges. That's basically ends up as a form of venture socialism. They make the profits, and if things go bad, then they're immunized from their conduct and from the losses. That's not the way, ultimately you build a healthy economy. So the lessons of that alone are with us today. I think this is a very impressive statue. This county that bears President Jackson's name, then General Jackson when he was here in Florida. This will be something that school kids will be able to come. We got the little placard that goes through, talks about Andrew Jackson's life and legacy, and then talks about his relationship to the free state of Florida. So I'm very proud of the folks that were behind getting this done. I knew it would be nice. I did not think it would be this grandiose, but now for, forever, when people come to Marianna, they're going to be able to see, this amazing statue here commemorating a really pivotal person in the history of Florida. So I'm excited for it. I want to thank Cord Bird for what he did. And Cord, you want to come up and make some comments?
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor. And what a grand statue. Thank you to our gracious hosts here in Jackson County, and for all the hardworking county officials, and I know our people over at the FDOT and the Department of State. Things like this don't just happen by accident. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that do a lot of hard work. But also want to thank the governor, because he's right. Back in *24, we looked ahead on the calendar and said 2026 is going to be a big year to celebrate America 250, and Florida leads on so many things. But I can say, in teaching our history, especially to our young people, I see some kids in the audience, and that's really what this year's celebration has been about. I mean, we, the adults, have had the privilege of living in the greatest, freest country on earth that's ever existed, and really this year is about imparting those principles that the governor discussed to the children. And when I was in D.C. for the 4th of July, it was really amazing. I mean, our pavilion, we won the award, by the way, for having the best pavilion, but also the busiest. I mean, the line, if you've been there on the mall, I mean, it stretched hundreds of people at a time, and it never let up. We had over 3,000 people a day come through our booth, and people who lived in Florida said, I'm so proud to be a Floridian, or people who had visited our state or wanted to move here. So it's really a testament to good government. I see my friend and former colleague in the House, Shane Abbott, here. I know Jay Trumbull's a good friend, your senator, and it really begins with good leadership, and that means that the good people of this county are making wise decisions on who they vote for. So we really appreciate that. But this is a year-long celebration. We have a back-to-school Florida Memory Timeline Challenge, exploring a Florida activity booklet, and watching America 250 FL, a Portrait of Florida docu-series. So we hope that you continue the education at home with the kids and telling them about all the great things that have happened here. We've billed our celebration as Florida, America's 14th colony. So even though we weren't one of the original 13 stars on the flag, as the governor alluded, there was a lot happening in Florida at that time, and our importance in the strategic future of the United States. So it is election time, and I am the state's chief elections officer, so I wanted to point out a few historical facts of what Andrew Jackson did with expanding voting rights. So Jackson's election in 1828 coincided with the expansion of voting rights to non-property holding men 21 years and older, where previously most states had required only property ownership as a qualification to vote. So as a result, Andrew Jackson's election was the highest voter turnout rate in America history at that time. He was our 7th president. And today, that legacy of free and fair elections continues in Florida. Under the governor's leadership, Florida has expanded our election integrity. We've passed more election integrity legislation in the past 6 years than any other state in the country, even though we already had free and fair elections. So I would encourage everyone, if you haven't voted, have a plan to vote, get out there, because it is our birthright from men like Andrew Jackson that gave us freedom and liberty and the ability to go out and cast a ballot and choose our future and choose our leaders. So I just want to say thank you again for being such a gracious host and cooperating with us. And I think Governor may take some questions.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Governor.
Great. When do you guys have school? Next week? Has it started yet, or did it start now? Now? Are you taking the day off, or are you homeschooled? Oh, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, are you in school yet, young lady? Are you really? Here, come up. Let's do a picture. What grade? First grade. Got it?
Thank you.
Come here. You got to document this if you weren't students from school. Come on. Show your teacher that you were actually here. Just take it here. All right. Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had one homeschool, which, you know, homeschool is a different adventure every day. The other two were in school, and they just had proof that they were actually here. So bring that to the teacher. You should be okay. All right, we have any questions back there? What about the peanut gallery? No? What are you? Are you beauty queen? Come here. You guys get up here. Come on. We'll do photos. All right, come on. What are you, Miss Grand Ridge? Teen Miss Grand Ridge. Okay, come on, get over there. Here, who's got it? Right here? Okay, good deal. All right, so I'm excited for this. I'm also just excited. Yeah, we've been very active in Northwest Florida. We definitely have done more for rural than any administration in the history of the state of Florida. It's been important, but part of it is just we understand it's an important part of Florida's culture, and it's an important part ultimately of the way of life and also economic opportunity. And I think you're seeing a lot of good stuff. We were talking before we came out here. I think it's the busy bee in Holmes County. Is that the big thing that's going to happen? And part of that was we did some infrastructure grants to kind of help with some stuff that was doing. I know we've helped other projects here that are going, and there is going to be a Buc-ee's on I-10, I think probably on the way to Tallahassee, somewhere outside Tallahassee. So that'll be a cool thing for a lot of people to be able to do. But we have believed both in the Rural Infrastructure Fund. Unfortunately, we have done a lot in rural on the hurricane response. With Michael happened before I was governor, but we did a lot with Michael when I got in, that's for sure. And then we had, Ian, not as much up here, but we had Idalia, we had Helene, and those were big. Debbie. So we've had a lot that's happened in North Florida over the last few years. Now we are in hurricane season. There are two little areas out in the Atlantic far away. We don't know. It's too early to tell what's going to happen. I think every one of you just knock on wood a little bit and just hope that they dissipate or move somewhere else. That'd be great. But, you know, we're prepared for all this stuff, and hopefully we're not having to be up here in response to one. But if it calls on us to do it, obviously you can count on us to be there, and we will get the job done. Okay, thanks, everybody. God bless.